with Arctic Slope Regional Corporation. We are in community development, though people mistake my involved in broadband, meaning that I'm in telecom. Do we have the slides? So as we went through, we actually came for today's conversations. We're getting ready to have a 30 terabit system land on our shores. And we've been asking ourselves, are there opportunities that we could learn from our fellow indigenous people to, work on language preservation, cultural preservation, and so as we went through yesterday's conversation, I realized that we had an incredible story to tell, and we are now learning so much from what you're already doing. In fact, I think we've reached out to some of you to help us with our broadband engagement going forward. So can we just go right on to the next slide? I want to talk a little bit about who we are. So unlike our brothers and sisters here in the South, our land claims were settled in these for-profit corporations under which our land holdings reside. We do represent the business interest of 13,000 Inuit shareholders. 50% of them are in our region, which is on the North Slope of Alaska, and 50%, throughout Alaska and the world. We are the largest Alaskan-owned company. 10,000 employees, $2.5 billion in revenue, major lines of businesses with offices nationwide. In Alaska, our breadbasket is oil and gas. But we have diversification and interests all over the rest of the U.S., construction, not so much technology, but government contracting, NASA, big space there. Not telecom. I'll be very clear with that. But we do provide dividends to our shareholders. We probably provide about $600 million a year in dividends to our shareholders. In addition to the dividends that we provide, we also provide socioeconomic benefits. This is jobs, education, training, and also community development initiatives like ours. One of the holdings that we have is a small capital financing organization where we provide seed money to our communities to start businesses, economic development, capacity building, those sorts of things. Next slide. So Madeline raised this slide, and I thought it was important that we add more content to this. So this is the subsea fiber. Clearly the economics of this project is the part of the fiber that goes from Japan to England. But the complexity of this project was so great that our investor suggested that we break this up into pieces. And because this Alaskan or US businesses, US regulations are much more predictable, or you'd think that they are. It was a big challenge, but they decided to break this off into a few pieces. So let me just take a step back. Our region uses satellite. So as we're going through some of the discussions that we're hearing today, in the city, we live in the big city, there's broadband, it's readily available, it's cheap. So we do a lot of community development programming out of Anchorage, and much like Madeline said yesterday, a lot of the content that we develop cannot be accessed by the very people whom we develop it for in our region. So 5 years ago, I'm a construction contractor by trade, but I've built infrastructure in the Arctic for many years, 30 years. And I was brought into the corporate offices, our home offices, to engage in community development. And a key part of that was we need broadband infrastructure. Satellite was very expensive. All of our educational programming at the schools are online. They're web-based. Kids are not able to reap the benefits, all the benefits of technology that are needed in our region. So in our minds, we have this whole group of kids that are being left behind. And to us, it's unacceptable. It's just unacceptable. So what we did was, our board of directors decided that we need to make broadband a priority. We need to bring this infrastructure in our region, and we need to put our resources behind it. Unlike many who wait, and there's lots of good reasons why people do. People wait for telecom to come to them. We did. We waited quite a few years, 15 years, before we finally said we just have to do it on our own. So 5 years ago, it just so happened that Quintillion Holdings came knocking on our door. What they recognized off the get-go, which partnerships are so critical in building infrastructure, but what they recognized 5 years ago was that they needed to partner up with the largest stakeholder, which meant that if we got behind this project and even made an investment, it gave the project instant credibility. So by the time, it was probably about a year after that, engineering was complete. We looked at it, made sense. Major investor came to the table. We checked them out, pretty good. And they were the primary investor. So this is not something that we could do largely on our own. So it was critical. That was a critical component. So off we went to try to build this project. And what we ended up doing, and this is the important part about why, not only just partnering with the largest stakeholder in the region, but one of the largest companies in the state, was that we ended up playing block and tackle. Incumbents within the state worked pretty hard to prevent a project like this from happening. We had a lot of naysayers, but thankfully, growing up in Barrow, watching infrastructure, being a part of organizations that built the infrastructure, we understood what it meant to build in the Arctic. We already had experience in oil and gas for underground burials of pipe, of lines going from, oil and gas locations from offshore to onshore. Short runs, but there was still lots of good evidence, safe. It could be done safe. Then we also looked at the nuke experience. They initially put it in Nuuk, Greenland. They didn't bury it, and it got cut by an iceberg. We learned from that. We applied that to the engineering on our project. And then we knew that there was Svalbard. It's in the high Arctic, so there's evidence out there that it could be done. But what we did know was that it was going to be challenged, and it was. So this is a massive undertaking. You only have 3 months out of the year to, work offshore on a project like this. Add that we're still a hunting and fishing society, so all of our subsistence is done in July, from July to September, early October. So the good thing, though, is that they understood that in order for something like this to happen, they also had to be, and this was us too. We were all at the table, being engaged with the community, being engaged with, the associations that managed the resources, to make sure that there would be no conflict with subsistence or any other activities out there that, are critical to the survival of our people. So today, the Quintillion terrestrial, these projects were both built at the same time, by the way. The terrestrial line from Fairbanks to Prudhoe Bay went live in April. This was a critical piece to making sure that we had, there was some place for the data in our communities to go to. So most of the landings were complete last year. This year, the offshore part of Prudhoe Bay, which we call Uliktok, was just completed 30 days ago, and now we're waiting. It's pinging. The tests are good, and we expect that this is going to go live in under 30 days. So if you go to the next slide, I just wanted to show you some pictures. We partnered, Quintillion partnered with Alcatel-Lucent. They're an international subsea cable company. had 5 ships as a part of the installation of this fiber. 2 were cable lay ships, 2 were ice diversion tugs, and 1 was a materials ship. Needed massive plows to bury the pipe 60 to 80 feet in most places. The onshore pieces were done by directional drill down 70 feet to go meet the offshore piece, miles. And it depended where. There's no one distance from onshore location to offshore. It just depended on the engineering from the seafloor topography data that we'd got. Next slide, please. That's the plow, the only one like it in the world, built specifically for this project. Next slide. Ice conditions. This is the Arctic, and it was quite a bit of that. Last year we had a lot of ice, much more than we'd had in years before. Next slide. The tug doing its job. Thank you.
So would you say this is fiber to the igloo? Or we have time for a quick question so we can go on a break. Do we have any quick question?
Amazing.
We have a question up front.
You should grab that one. Okay. This is a potentially really brief question. Can you mention who the other investors are?
So the majority interest in investor is Cooper Investment Partners, who's backed by this company called Access Industries. Access Industries owns Time Warner, Warner Music, I'm sorry. So they also own telecom. They've got a deep background in telecom. Difficult projects like this in telecom. Extraction industries, chemical industries. So it's a very large company. And so there are also smaller investors. Too many to name for the minority of the minority, but there's also another regional corporation subsidiary, Chilista's subsidiary, Futeris.
This may be a bit a deep dive on the regulatory side, but is there, are you going to liberalize backhaul from the submarine cable landing station so that others can bring in their own bits, as it were, their own connectivity? Some situations we've seen in some countries where there isn't liberalization at the submarine cable landing station prevents more competition and lower pricing, to put it in a simple way.
So one important piece about this is that, and then I'll get to your question, I won't be able to answer all of it, is that this project was entirely funded privately. There are no government dollars associated with it. And the other important piece, and one of the reasons why we invested, is that it's a wholesaler. So they are selling to other telecoms who do last mile. So we don't know what the plan looks like or the go-forward plan, but we know going to Japan is phase 2, and then phase 3 would go in the other direction. We keep hearing that there's other ideas about, a plan for phase 3, but, this was such a large undertaking that we thought we'd better focus on this and then worry about the others next.
Cheryl, thank you for your work. Congratulations, and we look forward to hearing more from Barrow. Thank you. So what we want to do now is that we are scheduled for a break, and I want to start the next panel at 2:15. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a break. Continue.